Hello, hello. Welcome to another subclass breakdown, another tier list here of probably what is my favorite class of Dungeons and Dragons 5e. Yes, I am one of the weird ones. I am someone who I love the Cleric. It is next on the list. I figured I might as well just start with the Barbarian and make my way all the way through the player's guide, and this is the next one. So this one's kind of near and dear to my heart. So I tried very hard to make sure that it would not intervene, that my mindset would not bias my choices here. And I think when you see my tier list, I think that I balanced it out pretty well. But this is probably one of my hands down one of my favorite classes of Dungeons and Dragons. So hopefully I will do it justice. But let's go ahead and get right on into it here. So again, I start off this video by going once again through the tier list, just kind of explaining what is going on through my head when I am planning, when I am drawing them out. So if something is an F tier, then that means that this, subclass is almost unplayable. To me, it is unplayable. F tier means that, this is a subclass that if you play it, you are understanding that you are going to be so situational, so marginalized, and even the things that the class is supposed to be good at in those situations, there are better options than this one. So as a power gamer, as someone who min maxes and who wants to, be good at what I want to be good at, if it is an F tier, that means it is unplayable for me. It is not an option I would ever choose under any circumstance. D tier, it is so situational that mediocrity is literally the best case option. In other words, yes, there are going to be maybe some instances where this class is decent, but even then, middle of the road is the best you can ever hope for. C tier means average. It means that this class could be worse, but it could also be better. So if you pick one of these, subclasses, then that means that, hey, you're going to be decent in some situations, you're going to be bad in others, and just overall, there are options that are just blatantly better than this one. And finally, for option B here, we have a B tier. Right, that means that we got good choices. All right, but are still, they still got a couple of things that are situational. There are still certain circumstances where, hey, this, and it could just come down to literally just one or two of its abilities, or even just the spell list that it's given. That just makes it to where it's like, okay, this class, it's not bad by any means. You could definitely enjoy it. You could definitely have fun in B tier, but there's just better options. And those are, of course, our A and S tier. So A tier, solid pick. Again, A tier does not necessarily mean it's worse than S tier in all aspects. It simply means that when I looked at my A tier, I went, okay, which out of all my A tiers is, in my opinion, the best of the best? And that becomes S tier. So A tier does not mean that it is a bad subclass. It just means that I think that there is one that is maybe just a little bit better. But this is the tier list. Let us then go ahead and get right on into taking a look here. Now, this is going to be a very, very weird list in order to explore because of the fact that there is just so many of them. The clerics have, what is it, like 14 different subclasses listed here. And this isn't even all of them. There's a couple that are found in, a couple of Matt Mercer's books. I know that he has like the Blood Cleric, I know is in there. There's some in the Unearthed Arcana. There's like one or two that are in the Swords Coast. So, this list could be as high as, 17. But I went with just the ones that are published, printed in the Player's Handbook, or directly printed by Wizards of the Coast, and therefore more likely that your DM would probably allow it. So without any further ado, let us go ahead and get right on into it. All right, so we're going right into F tier here. Congratulations, Cleric. You see, this is how I know I can't be biased for the Clerics, because it's the only class, well, it's the first class, that actually has something in my F tier. Yes, there is a Cleric class that you should not play. It is so awful. its abilities are so terrible. There are things that you can literally do by just taking certain spells that like a level 3 wizard gets to do, and it's just have it all centered around it. I don't know what the I'll be honest, I don't know what Wizards of the Coast were thinking when they made this class. I don't know who thought that this was going to be a good idea, because even in the handbook, back with the player's handbook, was the only book that had classes in them before Xanathar's, before Tasha's. Even then, this wasn't a good cleric. But hey, what can you do? So, spells. The spell list is pretty lackluster. All right, you got a couple of winners in there in the form of, say, suggestion, confusion. If your DM allow, depending on who your DM is, if they allow you to roll on it, or if they do it behind the screen. So, who knows what they rolled on that confusion table. Legend lore scrying. Again, some of these spells, they can be good if your DM is someone who is willing to go, yeah, if you scry on my big bad guy and they fail, I'm going to let you see something important. I'm going to let you see maybe where they are, or who they're talking to, or something unique about the situation that would make the scry effective. However, if you have a DM that's like, yep, my enemies always succeed the scry, or yeah, you legend lore this thing and you find out the same shit that you would find out if you just asked somebody about it, then all of a sudden this spell list looks a hell of a lot worse. All right, Blessings of Knowledge. At first level, you learn 2 languages of your choice. Great. You also become proficient in your choice of 2 of the following skills: Arcana, History, Nature, or Religion. Fantastic. Your proficiency bonus is double for any ability check you make that uses either of those skills. So why didn't they just say you have expertise in 2 of them? In these, I don't know. Normally, I'm a huge lover of expertise. I usually love subclasses that give you an expertise of some sort with this. My problem is that they narrowed it down to Arcana, History, Nature, Religion. The reason why this is such a big deal is because knowledge cleric is because if you are a cleric, odds are your highest stat is Wisdom. Your second highest stat is probably your Constitution, because you're a cleric, all right, and you're a pretty weak cleric, right? You have a D8 for your hit die, so you're probably going to try to have that as your second, which means your intelligence modifier is probably going to be your third or maybe even fourth of your highest of your stat blocks, which means you may only have like a +1, right, in your intelligence, which means even when you get to double your proficiency in Arcana or History, or I believe Religion uses your intelligence as well, it's not as big of a bump as you think it is. It's not like, say, a rogue where, okay, hey, I get expertise in my stealth, which means that not only do I get, proficiency 2 times 2 is 4, but I get to add that 4 on my already monstrous 5. So instead of +5, I get 9. Like that's a big bump. That's a big, effective tool. This would only be useful once you get, a proficiency bonus of like 3 or 4, and even then, just fucking legend lore. There are classes that give, there are classes you can pick that literally just let you do these things, and they do it way better. Just not good. It's not good at all. Channel Divinity. You can do either Knowledge of the Ages, which at second level, you can tap into Divine Knowledge. As an action, you choose 1 skill or tool. For 10 minutes, you are proficient with that chosen skill or tool. So once a short rest, you basically get to be proficient in a skill, which means that maybe the one time the DM makes you use it, you are maybe good at it. Or with the tool. I suppose if you have no rogue, and you guys go up against a lock that needs picking, maybe. But even then, you get to have your proficiency with it. What the fuck's what's the chance of your dexterity being that good? What's the like you're gonna end up taking this and putting something into proficiency, but the skill that it's contributed to, your intelligence, your charisma, your dexterity, is gonna be so low that it's just not gonna fucking matter. That's why this is just a joke. Now, the other channel divinity that you get is you have an ability to read thoughts, and it was such a big, thick chunk of text that I just, to summarize, you get to read thoughts. You basically get to detect thoughts. with this channel divinity. It's a little bit different. It has like a better range to it. I think it loses the like, hey, your opponent will feel when you're digging too deep. I think it loses that. But even then, it's basically just a detect thoughts. It's a variant of detect thoughts. Potent spellcasting. At 8th level, you get to add your wisdom modifier to cantrips. Whoop-de-doo. By 8th level, like, okay, great, I get to add a +4 to my damage on cantrips. Which, let's be, at 8th level, are you seriously still using cantrips on an average combat to combat basis? Maybe, because everything else you have sucks. But, like, if you mean to tell me you're at 8th level and you're not using things like Guiding Bolt, which is 4d6 plus advantage on someone's next strike, why the hell are you using a cantrip? But, I mean, hey, I got to give them something, I guess. 17th level, Visions of the Past. To put it simply, and this was, again, something that was a really big chunk of text, so I went through it, I read it, I was like, is there any way I can make this shorter? And then I realized I can basically sum it all up in one sense, and that is, you get to have the DM lore dump on you. Which, as a DM, I love that. I love being able to lore dump. I love when my players show interest in it. My problem is, and the exact wording is basically, the Visions of the Past is you can either pick up an object or you can go to a place. And you basically just get to ask the DM, hey DM, where is this object from? What is the history around this object? Basically, it's a really, really powerful identify. Or it's a really, really powerful area thing where it's like, hey, DM, I want to know what happened at this place in history. Here's my problem. Okay, 1, this is your 17th level. This is the Knowledge Cleric Capstone's ability. I can't tell you a time when my players really needed to know the entire backstory of where the hell they were. Maybe, like, there might have been like once or twice where I was like, wow, they're gonna step right over this ancient tomb, and because they miss these things, like, they're gonna not, they're not gonna know the full story of this tomb, which which was gonna be really cool in my book. But hey, they didn't do it, so they just went over it, and I'm not gonna stop them. That was their choices they made, so I'm not gonna sit here and force them to read on my lore. But even then, that's only happened a few times. Most of the time, like, this ability is so situational. It is so situational, and it basically has no, like, as a player, I wouldn't think to use this ability too often. And even then, as a DM, if my player ever picked up a magic item and said, DM, I want to know the full history of what this item was, I'd come up with some bullshit like, oh, this was crafted by so-and-so, it's gone through 10 family lineages, it's seen a lot of blood and death, but lately it's just been a relic on some dude's wall. And then that's it. And that would probably be the story for most of my items. This is why this is F tier. It is literally just a whole bunch of random, like, how can we make a cleric that is all about the history? Like, this is a librarian. If you want to make a librarian in D&D, and have them die by tier 2, so by like level 5 or 6, have them killed, this is the class to go with. Absolutely awful. I don't know how in the hell Wizards of the Coast ever came up with this and thought this is a good idea. But hey, here it is, our first F tier. Sadly, it is not the only one. All right, F plus tier. Maybe bottom D tier, possibly, simply because of literally just because of its spell list, to be honest. Its extended spell list is the only reason I'd even consider moving it up to D tier. But for me, it borders F plus, D minus. All right, and that is the Nature Cleric. Spells, Animal Friendship, Speak with Animals, nothing too crazy. Barkskin, however, giving you resistance to damage, might come effective. Spike Growth is actually a really effective area of effect. It's a very good control spell. D4 does a really good video where he shows, combined with Eldritch Blast and other abilities that allow you to move targets in and out of distances, being able to push them 5 feet, pull them 5 feet. Spike Growth can actually be a very powerful spell. So decent. Plant Growth is Wind Wall also Dominate Beast could be effective in certain campaigns, but to be honest, at a certain point, I find myself, at least as a DM, throwing more monstrosities and things at my players, and beasts kind of take a back road. But in some campaigns, it might be very effective. Grasping Vine, it's interesting. Insect Plagued, I think, is a joke. It's that last one, though, that I think is the best. Tree Stride. Tree Stride is, in my opinion, a better teleport. It is a guaranteed. There's no, like as long as I know that there's a tree somewhere, I can teleport my party there instantly. Really cool. And the fact that clerics naturally have 0 ability besides one. They have Word of Recall, which is a form of teleportation magic. But besides that, clerics do not have any form of teleporting. Anytime a teleporting spell in D&D is given, I instantly love it. And Tree Stride, I think, is one of the best. So that alone makes this a bottom, D tier class. The bad part is everything else on this list. Everything else sucks so bad that I can't give it a D tier. I don't think. At a first level, you learn a cantrip from the Druid spell list. You're probably going to take Druidcraft. The cantrip counts as a cleric cantrip for you. It doesn't count against anything others. You also gain proficiency in one of the following skills: animal handling, nature, or survival. Cool. Basically pointless. Odds are your cantrips, especially after Tasha's came out with Toll of the Dead, there, no druid cantrip is going to be better than the ones you don't already have. You're going to be using Guidance and Toll the Dead as your 2 primary ones. This is basically pointless. It's nice, but it's pointless. Also, at first level, you gain the proficiency to use heavy armor. Why the fuck is it that a nature cleric gets to use heavy armor, but a druid can't touch metal? Explain to me that one. I don't know if the people who made the druids and the people who made the clerics, they just never talked. I feel like this was an oversight. So great, you get to use heavy armor. You're gonna need it because everything else sucks for you. Channel Divinity, charm animals and plants. Starting at second level, you can use your Channel Divinity to charm plants and animals. As an action, you present your holy symbol and invoke the name of your deity. Each beast or plant that you can see within 30 feet of you makes a wisdom saving throw. If the creature fails, it is charmed by you for 1 minute or it takes damage. How is it that a plant can make a saving throw, or does it even make a saving throw? If it's a plant, it doesn't say. It just says if the creature fails, then it is charmed by you. Does that mean that all the plants in the area are immediately charmed by you? I don't know. While it is charmed to you, it is friendly to you and other creatures you designate. If you have a super awesome DM who's like, I'm going to make you like fucking poison ivy off of the DC universe, right? Like, I'm going to make it so that when you use this, you can tell the trees to bend and the branches to wrap around your opponents. I'm going to always make sure that there is some animals in the area that when you use this ability, you can use it and it'll be effective. If you have a DM that does that, then this ability is suddenly good. But remember, that is so situational. That requires you to have a really awesome DM, to have a conversation with the DM, and for them to kind of be willing to, to maybe allow certain creatures and things to happen. The fact that this is so vague and depending, and it is so vague enough that most DMs I think wouldn't be willing to do that. This is a joke overall. At 6th level, when a creature within 30 feet of you takes acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage, you can use your reaction to grant resistance to that creature against that instance of the damage. So in other words, only that attack's worth of damage, right? It's not like, hey, I give you fire resistance and now you're resistant the whole turn. It is, hey, I give you fire resistance for this attack that is being dealt to you that is fire. This is decent. The only problem is that it is 30 feet, and the second problem is that it is very specific with the types of damage. But the fact that, one, it gives you a reaction, which a lot of clerics don't really have much use for reactions, especially if you're kind of a distant cleric. If you're a cleric that isn't using things like, melee weapons too often, which, again, this has the vibe of something that's maybe a little distancy, and yet they give you heavy armor. That's usually reserved for like melee clerics. I don't know. I don't understand. This is a lot like the Berserker Barbarian, where it's like they put shit together and made it, and then they printed it, and then they called it good. At 8th level, you gain the ability to infuse your weapon with Divine Strike. A lot of clerics are going to basically at 8th level, either you get to add your wisdom onto cantrips, or you get a bonus D8 on your melee attacks, depending on what the flavor of cleric is. And this one is on your weapon. So I guess that they are. This is supposed to be a frontline fighter cleric. Sure, okay. Basically, you just get to do an extra D8 of one of these types of damage. It's nice that you get to choose the type. So, who knows? Maybe if you're fighting something that's weak against one of these, that's vulnerable, maybe it could be effective. But, yeah. And finally, at 17th level, you gain the ability to command animals and plants. While creatures are charmed by your charm animals and plants feature, which is your channel divinity, then you can use a bonus action to on your turn to verbally command each of those creatures to do something on its turn. Here's why that sounds amazing, but it actually sucks ass. One is, again, this relies on you using charm animals and plants and that it is actually effective and you have actually summoned animals that can do something. A lot of the time, especially at 17th level, where the fuck are you fighting? Like, where is your big, like, do you mean to tell me that every one of your big bads, that your DM's big bads, is out in a fucking forest? Or in a tundra where there's polar bears around? Like, no. All right, at 17th level, you're fighting bad guys that are in stone castles and fortresses where, like, they've killed every animal, because every animal would be a pest at that point, right? So, like, this relies on this ability that was already iffy to begin with. The second reason why that this sucks so bad is because there is a much better spell. There is a spell that will go down as being like the cornerstone of every single cleric, and it gives you a bonus action that is super, super effective, and that is, of course, Spiritual Weapon. Spiritual Weapon is one of the best spells a cleric can ever use ever. There are builds in which you take literally just enough levels of cleric to get Spiritual Weapon, and then you stop going cleric. That is how good Spirit Weapon is. That uses your bonus action. So does this. This is a worse version of a bonus action for a spell you already get. This is F tier. The more I look at it, I wanted to give it to it. The only saving grace is the spells, the dampen elements, and maybe the fact that you have heavy armor. So who knows? Maybe you get to take a couple of hits. But no, this is absolutely awful. F plus, if that. Moving into D tier, we have ourselves the Death Cleric, sadly. And I say sadly because, I don't know, I'm an edgy guy. All right, I'm an edgy boy. All right, I like the idea of a cleric that's gone bad. You know, a cleric that has realized that, you know, the only way to save the living is to kill them instead. I don't know. I like the idea of the Death Cleric. When I first read it, I thought, oh my god, this is going to be so cool. And then it wasn't, sadly. So 100% D tier here. In terms of its spell list, False Life, decent at low levels, absolutely pointless after like third or fourth. Ray of Sickness, Blind and Deafness, Ray of Enfeeblement, Animate Dead, Vampiric Touch, Blight, Death Ward, Anti-Life Shell, and Cloud Kill. Some of these spells are decent. Blight is good, right? It's a good offensive spell. I like that it's there. Death Ward is always effective as a cleric. You'll find that, you know, most of the time that's where most of your fourth level spell slots are going to go, probably, especially at higher levels, high tier, tier 2, tier 3, probably Death Ward. At bonus proficiency, when you choose this domain at first level, you gain the proficiency with martial weapons. Why it is martial weapons and not like almost any other time they've given, you know, when it comes to clerics, especially when they say, hey, you gain martial weapons and heavy armor. I don't know why they took that one out. I wish that they would have. That would have immediately, I think, made this just a little bit better. Would have been able to save it into C tier? I don't know. But I'm not a big fan of this. I don't understand why they just said, yeah, you're still going to have to wear light armor, you know, light or medium armor, but now you can also use a martial weapon. So, you know, instead of a D6, you get to use a D8. I don't know. And then none of the other things really assist with this. All right. Also at first level, you learn one necromancy cantrip of your choice from any spell list. You're probably going to go chill touch, whatever. When you cast a necromancy cantrip that normally targets only one creature, that spell can instead target two creatures within range and within the 5 feet of each other. That sounds really, really good because you think, oh my god, I'm going to get to attack two targets with this. How often, logistically, how often when you are a player does your DM have his enemies 5 feet away from each other? I bet you most of the time not. You know, and it's not to go against you. It's just that doesn't make sense in terms of combat. It doesn't make sense of the battlefield. So it sounds really cool, but what you're going to find is very quickly is that you don't actually use this as often as you think it does. Most of the, you know, the fact you do get a different cantrip, maybe. And I don't Toll the Dead, I don't think is considered necromancy, if I recall correctly. That might be something I have to look up. If Toll the Dead works with this, that might change my outlook on this sense, because D12s being able to do that twice, even if it's just sometimes, would be pretty good. But for some reason, I don't think it's necromancy, but it might be. All right, Channel Divinity, Touch of Death. Starting at second level, you can use your Channel Divinity to destroy another creature's life force. When you hit a creature with a melee attack, you can use your Channel Divinity to deal necrotic damage to the target. The damage equals 5 plus twice your Cleric level. It's once a short rest, which is nice, so you have the ability to use it multiple times throughout the day, if you have a DM that is pretty good at giving you short rest options. The fact that it does give you a number, plus twice your cleric level, it's not just like, oh yeah, you get to do it twice your cleric level. The fact that it's 5 plus your plus twice your cleric level means even at low level, a second level cleric being able to hit someone for 9 extra points of damage. 2 times 2 4, and then plus 5 is 9. That could be a very cool thing. That could be a very useful ability. Especially when at 6th level, you're whenever you deal necrotic damage, it ignores any resistances to that necrotic damage. Now it says resistance to it. It ignores resistance to necrotic damage. If you're fighting something that is immune to necrotic damage, the DM, that's up to DM. The DM may say, hey, they're still immune to it. It does nothing. Or maybe they knock it down and they say, okay, well, since you have this ability, maybe we'll make it resistant instead of immune. But again, that's relying on your DM and what they do. It's not a bad Channel Divinity. There are worse ones, but this is, again, very situational. And the fact that I feel like this is one of those abilities I think that like you would end up holding too long. I feel like this is something that you would constantly be like, okay, are we fighting a big bad that is worth this right now? Because for all we know, we may not have the option to short rest. So I don't want to blow it on something that turns out to not be the biggest threat to us. And I think what you would end up finding is that you end up not using it as often as it probably should be, which I'm not a big fan of those types of abilities. All right, at 8th level, here it is. It's your average, cleric 8th level thing. You get to add an extra D8 of damage. In this case, it has to be necrotic. And when you reach 14th level, it increases to 2D8. Finally, 17th level. Here we are, our capstone. When you cast a necromancy spell of 1st through 5th level that targets only one creature, very specific, the spell can instead target 2 creatures within range. So, for instance, your Blight, for instance. If they are within 5 feet of each other, if the spell consumes its material components, you must provide them for each target. So that means that if you do, I don't know if Blight uses material components, but if it does, and if your DM is one of those dicks that's like, yep, I'm going to ensure every time that you use a spell, I'm keeping track of the exact amount of ounces of bat guano your fireball is using, then this might actually not be as good as it sounds. Again, it's not a bad ability, but it's your fucking capstone. It's your 17th level. This is the thing you like. This is the thing you get at the end of the thing, and all it is just, hey, if you use a necromancy spell, you get to attack a second person with it. And I'm trying to think. I'm racking my brain right now as to how many spells in the cleric spell list are necrotic, and are necromancy school, and I'm not thinking of many. There's not too many that are. I guess maybe this could be effective if, like, say, you're about to use like Raise Dead, and you have 2 party members that are down. You can one spell slot, and you can bring both of them back to life if you drag their corpses next to each other. Maybe, but again, the moment I have to start coming up with weird situations where it might work, that's when you know that this is D tier. That's when you know that this is. Like, it's got cool flavor, but it's definitely not a subclass that I would be playing, I think, under any circumstance. It's definitely better than F tier. There is maybe some reason to play it, but not by much. So definitely D tier. We are moving on out of D tier already. I know it's kind of a nice little bump here where, I don't know, I thought about it, and there was a couple of clerics that I thought, maybe D tier, but even then, when you compare it to, say, the death domain, I just very quickly was like, nah, like this just doesn't compare. It's definitely a step above. So as such, we're moving right on into C tier. With the trickery domain cleric spells, you have actually a very good. I think I like when the extended spell list gives clerics spells that it normally doesn't get. I think just the more that I was kind of looking at them, the more I realized I was just like, you know what, I really appreciate it when the extended spell list gives the cleric spells that it normally wouldn't have. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But Charm Person, Disguise Self, Mirror Image, Pass Without a Trace, Blink, Dispel Magic, Dimension Door, Polymorph, Dominate Person, Modify Memory. There isn't a single bad spell in that entire list. Every single one of those has a use. Every single one of those is something that I would put on my list and is something I would probably use in campaigns multiple times. Definitely hands down. Now, Channel Divinity, Blessing of the Trickster. Starting when you choose this right at first level. You can use your action to touch a willing creature other than yourself and give it advantage on dexterity stealth checks. This blessing lasts for 1 hour or until you use this feature again. If Critical Role, if Jester off of Critical Role's Campaign 2 was anything to go by, this is actually a pretty effective little ability. Especially if you have someone who is maybe running around in heavy armor, you can turn this from having them always rolling disadvantage to just a flat roll. Not bad. Not bad at all. Definitely better than what I initially thought it was, I'll be honest. After watching Campaign 2 of Critical Role, I was like, okay, maybe this is actually a pretty decent ability. All right, now Channel Divinity. Invoke Duplicity. Starting at second level, you can create a duplicate of yourself. And as an action, you create it. It lasts for a minute or until you lose concentration. The illusion appears in an unoccupied space that you can see within 30 feet of you. And as a bonus action, you can move it. You can see through it. You can cast spells through it as if you were there. It has to stay within 120 feet of you, but it basically acts like a second you that you can send out and do things with. Here's why this is both decent, but it has a drawback. One, it's decent because there are times, imagine if you have the ability to move, say, 30 feet and you are desperate, to maybe reach somebody across the room or something and use Cure Wounds, and you've maybe already used your movement or something. To be able to create something that can then move 30 more feet and then touch somebody, to grant that to cast spells through them, like that's effective. That is effective. That is efficient. Here's though why that is lackluster, and here's why, probably for my whole opinion, why this is a bottom like C minus, C cleric. One, this uses up your concentration. So a lot of super awesome cleric spells require concentration. This eats it. Secondly, is because it uses an action to make this thing. It lasts a minute, and it can only ever move 30 feet. I don't know how often you find yourselves in closed 20 by 20 foot rooms. Maybe you are. Maybe you find yourself in a lot of combat scenarios where that's it, but a lot of my sessions, like our combat fields can be, 90, 150 plus feet, in diameter. To know that this thing can only ever move 30 feet, I don't know. There's bits and pieces. I wish that they would have made it just a little bit better, but it is what it is. Or you can channel Divinity and create a Cloak of Shadows. Starting at 6th level, you can use your Channel Divinity to vanish. As an action, you become invisible until the end of your next turn. You become visible if you attack or cast a spell. This is garbage. The reason why this is garbage is because there is literally, like, if you play a Furbolg, you just get to have a similar ability to this. And this uses your Channel Divinity. This is awful. Like, this alone keeps Trickery out of being B or A. At 8th level, you can infuse your weapon strikes with poison. Congratulations, you get your weapon damage increased by a D8, and it's poison. Here's why that sucks. Is because most monsters, most things that you fight, I find, are usually resistant to poison. I don't know what it is about poison. It's like poison, acid, and necrotic. Like those are like the three big ones that it seems like a lot of monstrosities, a lot of monsters out of the monsters manual, they are resistant to poison, acid, and necrotic. Those are like the top three resistances out there. So yeah, not great. 17th level, improved duplicity. You can now create up to 4 duplicates of yourself instead of 1, and as a bonus action, you can move them up to 30 feet. And again, keeping within the 120 feet range. This is where the invoked duplicity is actually good, because now I can move. Maybe I can move. I can send this thing out another, say, 30 feet. I can invoke duplicity, move it another 30 feet, and now I can use my action to, through my duplicity, cast a spell. So if I am desperate to get across a 60-foot space in order to revivify someone or heal someone, normally I couldn't do that as a cleric because I'd have to use my action to dash and get there. Now I can move my 30 feet, make a duplicate, get there as a bonus action, and then as an action, cure wounds, revivify, whatever. But this is your capstone. This is your 17th level. And again, even though you get to make 4 of them or etc., like it's cherry on top of an already mediocre sundae at best, with some very, very disgusting, rotten fucking peanuts and shit thrown in here. No, it is mediocre at best. The abilities are bland. Some of them are decent, but most of them are just kind of, when you start thinking about them critically, you realize just how unuseful they are. The spell list alone will give you fun. It is fun to modify memory. It is fun to dominate person. Polymorph is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful spells in D&D. It is insane. Pass Without a Trace can be fantastic. These are amazing spells. The spell list alone guaranteed it a spot in my mid to upper tiers, but everything else about it just dwindles and dwindles. So definitely solid C minus. All right, also in our C tier here is the Grave Domain. Basically the Death Domain that got a little bit of a bump, some things added to it, which made it much better. Not enough to get it too high of a ranking increase, but a little bit. Now this one might be a little, this one might cause a little bit of contention. This is one that I've seen a lot of people put Grave Domain higher. I think it's C tier, and I'll explain my thinking, and then I'll leave it up to you. Spells, it has a pretty mediocre to decent extended spell list. Again, False Life, good at levels 1 through 4. Then after that, it's pretty basic, pretty crap. Gentle Prose, almost pointless. If Taliesin Jaffe didn't basically make it a constant thing in as part of his character's thing, I guarantee most people wouldn't even know what Gentle Repose was. Rave Enfeeblement, Revivify, good, but all clerics get it, so I guess it's good that it's always in your spell list prepared, but Vampiric Touch, Blight, good. Death Ward, good. Anti-Life Shell, and Raise Dead. Again, it's basically it is a better version of the Death Domain Cleric, so a lot of the spells they share. All right, first level, Circle of Mortality. You gain the ability to manipulate the line between life and death. When you would normally roll 1 or more dice to restore hit points with a spell to a creature at 0 hit points, you instead use the highest number possible for each die. In addition, you have Spare the Dying cantrip. This is a monster of an ability. And the reason why this is such a great ability is because D&D 5th edition, and I've seen quite a few videos about this particular edition, it is almost better for you to allow your party to go to 0 and then bring them back up versus trying to constantly keep up with your DM's damage output. And the reason why is because the DM is always going to out damage you. There is maybe one or two subclasses of cleric that can maybe keep up with it. But odds are, if your DM wants to knock your party down, they're going to do it. So the fact that this says, hey, we're in we are in an edition of D&D where odds are your party's going to go down at some point. So here's an ability that's like, hey, you want to cast, a third level cure wounds. You don't have to roll, 3d8 plus your wisdom. You just instantly raise them by, 24 plus something. This is good. This is a really solid ability. The only problem is, right, because I'm trying to be unbiased here for how great of an ability this is. You're kind of flirting with danger a little bit. It may mean that you as a cleric may make the decision, I'm not going to heal this person even though they're really low on HP, because I know I have an ability that makes it so that when I do heal them at 0 HP, it does so much better. But maybe by the time you've made that decision, decided not to heal them on your turn, by the time it gets back to you, maybe they have failed their 3 death saves. Maybe you have a DM that's willing to say, hey, if my monster would not just knock you to 0, but would then claw through your flesh and eat your insides, thereby, achieving the whole, melee attacks within 5 feet, insta crits, which means 2 death saves every time it gets hit, you may end up making a decision that might actually cost your party member a life. Now eventually, once you have a Revivify and Raise Dead, that's not a fear anymore. But maybe early on, if you make the conscious decision that I'm only going to ever, heal someone when I can use this ability, it may actually be a detriment. But again, that comes down to a DM. If your DM is much more of the, if I knock a player unconscious, then every one of my enemies will always move on to the next living conscious player, then this is a great ability. But keep that in mind. Also at first level, you have Eyes of the Grave. You gain the ability to occasionally sense the presence of undead. As an action, you can basically look out within 60 feet and see if there is any undead within that area. I don't know. I just find generally with my DMs anyway, that if there is an undead within 60 feet of us, they are already aware of us and they are already attacking us. So every once in a while, this might be interesting. Maybe if if your DM is prone to maybe sending out cool surprises, who knows? You may, surprise the DM when, they've sent a character, an NPC to interact with you, and they think it's really cool that it's a revenant and it's going to be this big, huge surprise later. And then you're just like, Eyes of the Grave. Oh, look, it's something undead. Maybe it'd be cool. But overall, it's okay, but it's not great. And you can use this up to your wisdom modifier. All right, Channel Divinity. At second level, you can use your Channel Divinity to mark another creature's life. This is the reason why most people pick Grave Domain. This is like one of the most powerful, probably one of the most powerful abilities in 5th edition out of the casters, to be honest. As an action, you choose a creature that is within 30 feet. The next time an ally of yours hits it, the creature has vulnerability to all of that attack's damage. This is something where I would talk to the DM and say, hey, DM, I don't want to roll initiative anymore. Whenever the paladin is about to go, I go first. All right, like somehow come up with a plan where it's like every time we go into combat, I want to make sure I'm right before the paladin. And then use, or the rogue, the sneak attack. Like this is absolutely nuts. This is just absolutely crazy of an ability. The way they balance it out is that it is an action. So if you use it, odds are you yourself are not able to, activate this effect. Unless you multi-class into a class that allows you to, quicken spell. This is a great ability. A lot of multi-class options with it. It's solid. It's monster. All right, Sentinel at Death's Door. At 6th level, you gain the ability to impede Death's progress. As a reaction, when you or an ally within 30 feet of you suffers a critical hit, you basically just say, that's not a critical. I am negating it. This is useful. This is good. It is situational because, again, it is only ever going to happen when when someone is getting hit with a crit, but it could very well save a character. It could, when it comes in handy, God, will they love you that you have it. So it's good, but situational. 8th level, you get to use your wisdom modifier now on cantrips. Here you go. And 17th level, your capstone. You can seize a trace of vitality from a parting soul. When an enemy you can see dies within 30 feet of you, you or one ally of your choice that is also within 30 feet of you regains hit points equal to the enemy's number of hit dice. You can use this feature only if you aren't incapacitated. Once you use it, you can't do so again until the start of your next turn. Here's why this ability sucks, and here's why this, combined with the situational part of Death's Door, Sentinel of Death's Door, plus Eyes of the Grave. Here's why this is a C tier for me. Capstone abilities for me need to be awesome. They need to be something that when you reach 17th level, you're like, holy shit, thank God it in multiclass. Thank God I made it here, because this is such a great ability. Most enemies don't have too crazy of hit dice numbers. Double digits maybe. Like they maybe are in like the low teens. So once a turn, if an enemy dies within 30 feet of you, you or someone else may gain, on average, at 17th level, let's say 15 or so hit points. At 17th level, 15 hit points ain't shit. All right, 15 hit points is like great. Instead of, I'm still going to die in one attack. Zariel's sword is still going to do, 50 something points of damage to me. So I'm still going to die, but thanks, I guess, for the 15. Like, it's not, I don't know, for a capstone, like, and that's kind of the story, I think, of the Cleric. So many of Cleric domains, their capstones just suck. But yes, this is definitely high C, maybe even like low B. This is like a C plus, B minus domain. I know I've seen a lot of videos where people put this as like B or even A tier, but to me, that is relying too much on, one, the Circle of Mortality actually being used almost to the point of being overused. You're putting party members in danger of actually dying by waiting that long. And then the Channel Divinity. Don't get me wrong, this Channel Divinity is probably one of the most powerful Channel Divinities that all clerics have, period. But it's something you only get to use once. It is something you only get to use as a bonus action, or once a short rest, sorry. It takes an action to use. Yeah. All right, and with that, we are leaving C tier, but I think we will end it here. I think we will kind of cut this in half. Again, most of my videos, most of my tier lists generally go, the bads first and then the goods. And I think leaving it at C tier is probably about as good as we're going to get. So we will end it here with the C tiers. Catch part 2 of the Cleric tier list to see the good stuff, to see the B tiers, the A tiers, and of course the all-powerful S tier. I hope that this was enjoyable. I hope that maybe you picked up something, learned something. Whatever the case, hope you enjoyed it, and I will catch you next time.